Lisa was an Uber driver, working late-night shifts to earn extra money. The city was eerily quiet that evening, with only the faint hum of streetlights to keep her company. Around 1:30 a.m., she received a request from an unfamiliar location on the outskirts of town. Despite her hesitation, she accepted the ride. When she arrived, she found a man standing near a dimly lit street corner. He was dressed in a black coat, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Without saying a word, he climbed into the back seat and gave her a curt nod. Lisa asked for the destination, but he didn't respond. Instead, he simply handed her a note with an address scribbled on it. She began driving, her unease growing with each passing minute. The man sat completely still, not even shifting in his seat. Glancing at the rearview mirror, Lisa noticed something strange. His reflection wasn't there. Her heart raced, but she kept driving, trying to rationalize what she had just seen. Halfway to the destination, her phone glitched, and the GPS stopped working. The man finally spoke, his voice cold and distant. "Turn left," he instructed. Lisa obeyed, even though the road led to an abandoned industrial area. When she stopped the car, the man simply got out and walked away without saying a word. She watched him vanish into the darkness before speeding off, her hands trembling. The next day, out of curiosity, Lisa searched for the address he had given her. It turned out to be an old warehouse where a brutal murder had occurred years ago. The victim was a man in a black coat, eerily similar to her passenger. Lisa quit her job that very week, but she still wonders who, or what, she had driven that night. Moral: trust your instincts, for they may guide you away from dangers you cannot comprehend. David was staying at his grandmother's old farmhouse while his parents were out of town. The house was isolated, surrounded by fields and dense woods. David loved the quiet, but it always felt a bit too quiet after sunset. One night, as he was about to fall asleep, he heard the faint sound of a baby crying. Confused, he sat up in bed and listened more closely. The cries seemed to be coming from outside, near the woods. David hesitated but decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped outside into the chilly night air. The cries grew louder as he approached the edge of the woods. He called out, asking if anyone needed help, but there was no response. The cries suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. David turned to go back inside when he noticed something strange. There were small footprints in the dirt, leading deeper into the woods. Against his better judgment, he followed them, his flashlight flickering. The footprints ended abruptly near an old, abandoned well. As David leaned closer to the well, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He spun around, but there was no one there. Panicking, he ran back to the house and locked all the doors and windows. That night, he couldn't sleep. The baby's cries returned, louder and more desperate than before. The next morning, his grandmother told him about the well's dark history. Years ago, a baby had fallen into it and drowned, and locals claimed to still hear its cries at night. David left the farmhouse the next day, vowing never to return. But sometimes, late at night, he swears he can still hear those cries, even from miles away. Moral: not every call for help is meant to be answered, for some voices belong to the past. Mark was on a business trip and arrived late at a small-town hotel. The receptionist greeted him warmly and handed him the key to room 303. As he walked down the dimly lit hallway, he felt an odd chill in the air. When he entered the room, it felt wrong immediately. The walls seemed too close, the air was heavy, and there was an unexplainable smell of decay. Ignoring his discomfort, Mark unpacked his belongings and prepared for bed. Around midnight, he woke up to the sound of faint knocking on the walls. At first, he thought it was just the neighboring room. But when the knocking moved to the headboard of his bed, he froze. He turned on the light and checked the room, finding nothing unusual. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The knocking started again, this time louder and more frantic. Desperate for answers, Mark called the front desk. The receptionist seemed confused. "Sir, there is no room 303 in this hotel," she said. Mark was stunned and insisted she come check the room herself. When she arrived, she found Mark standing in an empty hallway. There was no door, no room, nothing where room 303 should have been. Mark left the hotel immediately, shaken and confused. Later, he learned that the hotel had suffered a fire years ago, and room 303 was completely destroyed. But guests occasionally reported strange occurrences in the space where it once stood. Moral: some places are best left forgotten, for their history lingers in ways we cannot understand. These stories remind us that the unexplained often lies just beyond the surface of our reality. Curiosity and courage may lead us into darkness, but not all mysteries are meant to be unraveled.